I'm very happy to introduce Jen Owen, who is the mother of this movement. ENABLE is an innovative, collaborative process with the person who has the need knower. It is also a movement because we are trying to identify the needs of individuals or communities and address them with this rapid collaborative innovation. Jen has been documenting that process and the application of that process to people's needs and communities' needs, including Enable Enlightens, bringing solar power to people who were so disenfranchised in Sierra Leone that they didn't have electricity in their homes. And the outcomes of that, the impact of the prejudice on people with upper limb differences and the effect it had on their children's ability to pass their exams, changing when the parents had power and then the generations that they were taking care of also had that ability to study or to take better care of themselves and the effect on their health. Those kinds of things are ENABLE. ENABLE is a community that has always been committed to doing what they could, as imperfect as it was, so that the people they were caring for and the others in the future that had similar needs would be able to at least be heard, have it well documented so that we didn't waste their pain, and to try and begin a process of making an affordable solution. So initially, Jen had been speaking online to this community that rallied to create the first problems that were solved, and then she grew that from her heart and her blogging into what we are right now. So I'm going to ask Jen to tell us our Genesis story and to give us some viewpoints of what she sees. Thanks.
Okay. My name is Jen Owen, and I am the founder of EnableCon, and I've been the mouth and the speaker, kind of documenting everything for almost 7 years? Yeah. 6 or 7 years? Yeah.
7 years, because our 10th anniversary was kind of the same.
Yes. So, how many of you have wanted to be superheroes since you were little? Me? How many of you have ever run around town dressed in your underwear in the middle of July, dressed as superheroes? Well, I come from a family where we really enjoyed dressing up and being weird. And so my friend Ivan and I decided to go to a steampunk convention, and he made a large mechanical hand that could function. And so we went there, and when we got back, he decided to make a video of it and put it online. We did not realize how popular that was going to be. After about 6 months, we got an email from a carpenter in South Africa who had accidentally cut off the dominant fingers of his main hand, and he sent an email asking if we would be able to help him create a single finger to help him get back to work. And that was a turning point in my life and a turning point in all of your lives. When he jumped up from his computer and said, "Jen, there's this guy in South Africa, I want to help him. Can we do this together?" I said, yes. It's going to take a lot of work. We're going to have to spend a lot of time going back and forth, and we were on it. There was a person who needed help, and we had the ability to help him. So we chose to say yes. So immediately they started working from 10,000 miles apart online. Richard, the carpenter in South Africa, sent us a model of his affected hand so that Ivan could design around that in real time. He was having a bit of a hard time coming up with a design that would work for a human versus, a mechanical project prop hand. So he did some research and found the hand of Corporal Coles, which was created in the 18th century from an Australian dentist that was carved out of whalebone, and it used a system of pulleys and cables. And that is where the idea for the first e-NABLE hand came from. So Ivan took inspiration from that, and he started using whatever he could find around the house that he knew that Richard in South Africa would have, so that when he designed something, he could show pictures to Richard, and Richard could replicate it, and then he could tell Ivan if it was working for him as the amputee. I started documenting their progress on what we decided to call coming up short-handed, kind of a pun for Richard. And we started getting a following of people who were really curious to see what was going to happen. After a while, when the media started picking up what we were doing from the blog, and we got into Make Magazine, we got science communities were starting to kind of wonder what was happening, and were really watching to see what we would do. We had to start an Indiegogo, I think it was, or a GoFundMe, because with them being 10,000 miles apart, Richard at that time was trying to design what they were making. So we needed to first get Ivan to South Africa, and so they could work in person, and Richard also needed a couple of different pieces of equipment to be able to do what they were trying to do out of metal. In November of 2012, Ivan was able to head to South Africa because people donated to help get him there, and they were able to, in 3 days, wrap up kind of their first real prototype for Richard, and they were working on just a single finger for him. While they were there, I was blogging. They were getting more and more news media, and now that they were together in the same place, a couple of magazines picked it up in South Africa and started sharing. Which led to, this is Liam. Liam is the first child in the world to get a 3D printed prosthetic hand. His mom had heard all of the news media and asked if Richard and Ivan could make him a hand, even though they had only made a finger at that time. And so they said yes. So Ivan took the original mechanical hand that he had made and shrunk it down to tiny size, and somehow got through TSA with these weird little metal things in his bag. And he got to South Africa and nobody questioned anything. They worked an entire day building this little tiny 4-fingered metal hand for Liam. Liam actually participated in making the hand himself, so he got to experience design right from the start. At the end of the day, he was able to pick up an object and wrap his fingers around it, and the first thing he said was, "It copies me." He had never picked up anything with that hand before. When Ivan got back, he realized that Liam was going to outgrow that very quickly, and it had taken them 24 hours or more to make it. So he started researching to see what their options were, and he discovered 3D printing. He had never 3D designed anything ever, so he just kind of threw himself into it and made a blocky version of the metal hand so that he could send the files to the printer, print it out, and as Liam would grow, then he could just size it up. He got MakerBot to donate 2 printers, one for him and one for Richard in South Africa, so they were able to collaborate back and forth. Ivan would send the file to Richard, Richard would print it out, assemble it, have Liam test it, and give feedback, and then tell Ivan what needed to be changed. And at probably about 2 months after they started with the 3D printers, they came up with the first robo-hand design, and they patented it. They refused to patent it. They wanted to put it out on the internet for anybody to take it. Ivan knew that he didn't have the skills to really make it what it could be, but he wanted to share it and get it out there and see what the rest of you guys could do with it. Once that came out and the news really started picking it up, we started getting emails from people all over the world who were wanting Ivan and Richard to make hands for these kids. And there was no way to do that. They were both working full-time. We had families. We just took the cases as we could. I think Ivan created maybe 2 or 3 devices. Richard started making some in South Africa, and they were getting in the news again. At that time, I was just shutting down the Coming Up Shorthanded blog because it was too much. In May of 2013, MakerBot decided they wanted to do a video on Liam and Ivan and Richard, so they came to our house and they filmed in South Africa and they put together a video. In July of 2013, John Scholl, who was a professor at RIT at the time, noticed that people were putting comments on the map or on the video, and invited people to, step up. If you really wanted to help, put your pin on the map and put your money where your mouth is. So they started signing up and they started putting pins on the map. In January of 2014, I decided that the Google Plus community that had been formed was a private community, and we had people who were starting to make hands, and they wanted to connect with recipients, but there was no way for them to find us unless somebody started telling the stories. So I started bugging all of the volunteers, especially Christian Silva, who had taken off and really just started going for it in Colombia, and there was a couple of people in Brazil who had started making hands. And I wanted to share their stories so that more people could find us. And more people started finding us, and we started making more hands, and the volunteers got to be part of that. We started making all sorts of different designs. Kids were able to pick up things. They were able to jump rope. They were able to do simple things. They couldn't pick up heavy things or do it had a plain grasping motion, but it was something. It was something that they could have. We started getting more refined designs. And then the community went superhero and started making all sorts of fun themed designs that the kids were really starting to enjoy. We had some fun with themed hands. We had some events where we got to make them into real-life superheroes. And then we decided that instead of making the hands for people, we wanted to teach them to make them themselves. The kids who were starting to make them themselves were more inclined to use them because they were part of the build process. After a little while, younger kids started seeing the kids who were making them their own hands, building hands, and they decided that they wanted to start making hands too. In 2014, the end of 2014, Maria started having her scout troops putting together hands in assembly line kind of fashion, and she was kind of the mother of creating these hand build-a-thons, where the kids could go from, the little tiny ones could do the little stuff, and then the older kids could really assemble them and put them together. And at the end of the day, you had 100 or so scouts, and they had created a bunch of hands, and all of those kids had been impacted. Schools started picking it up and using it as an example of what they could do with 3D printers in their classrooms. It was really something that helped teachers to be able to go to their PTA and say, you know, we want this technology in our classroom. This is something we could do with it, and it was really helping to show that they could use this technology for good. There were numerous universities who were able to create devices and send them overseas with their students on mission trips. By 2015, we had a crazy amount of innovation. It kind of just exploded there in 2014. Once the news media picked up, and once we had gone to do our first conference at Johns Hopkins, we really started seeing more volunteers and more recipients being matched up. We started seeing the formation of chapters, and not just chapters who were helping in their own countries, but they were collaborating with other chapters. So for example, the France chapter was able to make a device for a little girl in Togo, and that volunteer was able to fly that arm to her and collaborate with the volunteers there. We started learning that people in underserved communities and other cultures were not interested in the superhero hands. They really wanted colors that matched their skin tones and made them fit in rather than stand out. So Jeremy at 3D Universe worked with the community to come up with a few different skin tone colors of filament that we could start printing with, and we started putting that out there, and the chapters in other countries really started coming in once we had that option. And then we started innovating again, and started coming up with all sorts of different designs. We were getting a lot of feedback by then from people who wanted the hands to look more real and lifelike, especially from the adults. Over the last couple of years, we've really started refining the designs as a community. They're starting to look more and more lifelike, less robotic. We've got chapters who are experimenting with really amazing new designs. We've got chapters who have gone off on their own and don't really collaborate with the global community, but they are still considered our family. We've got electric versions that are being put out here and in other countries. We started getting feedback from the actual adult recipients as to what they wanted, and also the children. We discovered, or John discovered, that sometimes they don't want their hands to look the same. This little guy decided that he wanted a longer arm so he could reach stuff. If you've never had an arm, why not modify it to something that you really want? We started getting some really good feedback from the younger kids who, they were okay with how they were born, and they learned how to do things with their hands without fingers. And so little Luke here decided he wanted a claw hand, and so he designed that. I kind of took that and ran with it and asked the community to think outside of the box and stop focusing just on hands, and see what kind of tools that we could make for people. We started getting requests for task-specific devices. People wanted to be able to have their children play the trumpet or the violin, and the 3D printed hands that we were making were not going to work. We've created various bicycle attachments, sports attachments, jump roping, hockey. And these are all of these designs are coming from our chapters that are working with the recipients in their local communities. And then we discovered we could help animals. And we have our Enable Germany volunteer who offered to take on a large, sharp, pokey-beaked bird and help her to be able to walk again. And now he tells me that she's running so fast they can't keep up with her. We have, over the years, had a lot of requests for lower limb devices, and as most of you know, that's not something that the average home user should be able to make. That requires a lot of medical attention. So our designers and some of the universities started thinking, well, what can we do? And so some of them started coming up with coverings to hide the prosthetics, to make their pants fit better, or to make them feel more confident. We've got a couple of chapters who are working on foot prosthetics. Christian Silva in Colombia had been trying to figure out a way to create a lower leg prosthetic. I'm not sure how that's going. It's going well. And then I started realizing, well, we're doing hands for people who have no fingers. What about people who still have their fingers but have lost function? And I realized that we had this entire community of people who really wanted to help and make a difference. So why stop at the people who have no fingers? What about the people who still have them? So I collaborated with a couple of companies, and we came up with the Within Reach Design Challenge to come up with designs for people who were not able to use their fingers anymore. And in that challenge, we had about 100 designs, all open source. Many of them were created by young kids between 5 to 18 years old. And they're just simple things that people can use, and they can be printed out easily and for low cost. After that, we discovered that, well, why do we stop there? We have the ability to help all sorts of people. So I, again, collaborated with a company, and we decided that, well, we should maybe try to help people who can't see. So we came up with another design challenge, and we threw that out there. How do you show a blind person what a platypus looks like, or what constellations look like? Using our 3D printers, we can make models that they can hold, or things that they can touch and pass around. So we did the Envision the Future challenge, and we came up with, again, over 100 devices, or 100 designs for tools that teachers could use in their classrooms and parents could use at home. Raise your hand if you can solve a Rubik's Cube with your eyes closed. This blind person can now solve a Rubik's Cube because of our Enable community and the challenges that I threw out there. What can you do with your ideas and your imagination to make a difference in somebody else's life? You have the tools, you have it inside of you, and this boy here, he got to use a Rubik's Cube for the first time in his life. I really like this quote: educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. All of us in this room have the ability to teach other people what we're doing, and teach them that their ideas and imaginations can change other people's lives. we started getting more and more schools involved, not just in 3D printing, but they were taking the message that we were giving, you know, use your ideas, create, share them, see what other people can do with them, and started putting that challenge out there to teachers. Teachers taught their students, and then they started taking their students out to be teachers. So we've got a couple of teachers out there who are taking their students to retirement centers and teaching the elderly how to use this technology to create things that they need. So this class here went to a retirement home, and they ended up interviewing the people who were there to ask what they needed. So now they have 3D printed bingo chips that they can pick up more easily. They have a book stand, and they're learning to design at 80 years old. And then we have the recipients who have now turned into teachers and who are now out there inspiring other people to make these hands and these devices. This is Aaron from Form 5. As a high school senior, he started his own nonprofit after getting his own 3D printed hand. And now he is making appearances at schools and inspiring kids all over the place. Cameron, he's one of our youngest volunteers. He was donated a hand by 2 middle school girls a couple years ago. And he uses that thing like crazy. And then his family decided that they wanted their own 3D printer so that they could start innovating. Now, he's not just a recipient, he is also a very young innovator and inventor. This community and the hand that he was given has inspired a spark in this little guy, and he is now out there visiting schools. He is teaching other children how to be innovators. For every single child that is gifted a hand by a school, you're not just impacting that one child, you are impacting all of those students who are part of that process and that donation. And when you give the students a real life person to create for, it really sets off something in them, and it makes them realize that they can do a lot more than they thought they could. This is an old map. There are many more pins than this now. But we have gone from one child being helped to thousands of children being helped. And it's not because of one person or 2 people. It's because of a community. And it's because of all of you finding your inner superhero. You don't have to think of it as we are becoming superheroes. We have been superheroes this entire time. Every single one of you has been a superhero this entire time. You just didn't know it. What's your superpower? Christian, what would you be doing today if e-NABLE wasn't in your life? John, where would you be? Jeremy, what would you be doing? Skip, anybody? What would you be doing right now? Would you know how impactful you could have been? e-NABLE isn't about hands. It's not a community making 3D printed hands. e-NABLE is a movement. It's a kindness. It's sharing and giving. It is people helping people. That's what e-NABLE is. We've got thousands of people helping people, and there's nothing better than that. I see every single one of you as my family, and I love you all, and I just hope that you all know just how amazing and incredible you are, and I hope that you continue letting your superpowers grow and shine and spread into the world. And that is us.